Bismillah.
All right, the jurors have some questions for you. Regardless of conversations, is there anywhere in the autopsy report that can discern the time of injury and sequence in which those injuries were sustained?
I don't specifically address that in my report. I wait for those hypothetical questions to be posed to me, and then I answer those questions.
Fair enough. Let's see how we answer this question.
In your opinion, what was the first injury?
I have no way of knowing other than to say that all of the stab wounds could have happened in sequence. The fatal wounds, I believe, are the neck wounds, the wound to the chest, although he could have still struggled at that point, and then the gunshot wound. But all the other wounds, I can't establish a sequence for those.
You heard it. All right. Now, let me show you how it was done using your own report. In order to answer the question that Horn couldn't answer, we're going to use his own report plus the characteristics of each wound. If you go to page 3 of his report, it says, all wounds display blunt and sharply incised ends. Now, while this statement is referring to the cluster of wounds to the back, we can actually observe and verify that it applies to the stab wounds to the chest, the one near the heart and the one near the collarbone. Based on that statement on page 3 of the report, we can deduce the exact sequence in which the wounds were sustained. We can also prove that the prosecution's version of events is literally impossible, and most importantly, we can also prove that her claim of self-defense is also impossible. I'm going to talk about what the prosecution did wrong and Arias' plan in future videos, but now I'm just going to show you how I deduced the exact sequence in which the wounds were sustained. If you look closely at these two wounds to the chest, you're going to notice that the sharp side is on the right. Travis's right, your left. Just keep that in mind, and let's look at the 4 wounds to the left hand and see what we can deduce. Let's start with the large wound to the palm of his left hand. For the purposes of this video, all you need to know is that the 2 strikes that caused these 2 wounds to the chest couldn't have possibly caused this wound, because the sharp side of the knife would have been facing the other way. As for when this wound was sustained, it was sustained towards the end of the attack, and it actually was the last defensive wound, but more on that in a future video. Now, let's examine the small wound under the index finger. Based on the angle, we can deduce that the fingers must have been extended when this wound was sustained, because if the fingers were closed or almost closed, there would have been other wounds on the palm of his hand. Now, the third wound is this one right here to the back of his left thumb. This one is pretty straightforward. His hand must have been turned like this when it was inflicted. Now, the fourth and last wound to the left hand, which is this one, holds the key to deducing the exact sequence in which the wounds were inflicted. If you look closely at this wound, we can see that it is mostly on the back of his hand. However, it also extends onto the palm of his hand. Not only that, but the cut is also very deep. The only way to injure the back of his hand and the palm side of his hand like this is if his hand was turned like that and at the same time it was pressing against his own body. Why? Because the wound is mostly on the back of his hand, which means his hand must have been turned like this. And why does it have to be pressing against his own body? Well, because this is what happens when you press against this part of the hand. Look. The part that's been deeply cut would be pushed out and pinched between the knife and the body. This is the only one of the 4 wounds that Horn uses the word deep to describe. It was a deep cut. Wait, it's a deep cut, right? So could it be related to the deep wound to the chest in any way? Actually, yeah, the answer is yes, it is, but not just because it is the only wound that Horn used the word deep to describe. There is a photo that shows the palm of Travis's left hand. If you rotate this photo such that you can put your left hand on his left hand, you can then draw a line or use your finger to determine the angle of the wound. Then turn your hand like this and put it on your chest. And there you go. These 2 wounds are connected. Now, we can further deduce that the wound under his right nipple was inflicted before the wound to the heart. Because if you get wounded, you instinctively put your hand on the wound to stop the bleeding. So this is how it went down. The wound under his right nipple was inflicted. He placed his hand on his chest to stop the bleeding. She stabbed him in the heart. He placed his hand on his heart to stop the bleeding. She stabbed him near the collarbone, which also inflicted this wound to the back of the thumb. And then as he was reaching for the knife to grab it, the blade of the knife cut him right here under his left index finger. Right, that the angles match and everything. This is exactly how it happened. Now, these are just surface level deductions. This is not everything that I have. I've made more deductions based on the characteristics of these wounds. I'll share those in a future video. But just for now, just know that this is exactly how it happened. This one was first, this one was second, this one was third. As far as these two are connected, this one and the one to the heart, the collarbone and to the back of the thumb are connected. You get the idea. Now, what does that prove? What does that have to do with anything? Well, first of all, this proves that the stab wound to the chest couldn't have possibly been the first stab wound. It is literally impossible, which Juan Martinez kept arguing multiple times throughout both trials.
With regard to the injuries that were inflicted, according to the medical examiner, the first injury was the one to the heart. And when that was inflicted, Mr. Alexander at some point began to fight. And what he was able to do was grab the knife, but he grabbed the blade of the knife so that he has cuts in his hand as he's fighting, presumably for his life. They're called defensive wounds.
Not only that, but you can further deduce that he couldn't have possibly been stabbed in the shower. In fact, not a single stab wound was inflicted in the bathroom area at all. All stab wounds were sustained in the hallway. None of them were inflicted when he was standing up. All of them were sustained or inflicted when he was on the floor. So no self-defense there. Actually, you can even deduce that he saw the first attack and was able to stop it. The first knife attack, that is. I'll share how I deduced that in a future video, but you can deduce that from the wound under his right nipple. If you want to think about it and practice deduction, well, go ahead. You can actually deduce that he saw the first attack and was able to stop it from that wound. Let's see if you can figure it out. Well, this is it for this free episode. Just before I end the video, I just want to clarify a few things because I don't want what I say to be misconstrued in any way, and also I don't want to keep repeating myself throughout the future videos. Now, Travis Alexander. Obviously, he's the victim in this case. I don't really care about his past, what he did for a living, and all that irrelevant stuff. It doesn't really matter to me. If you want to argue with someone else about, oh, he wasn't a good person, he did this to this person, he did it to that person, I don't really care about that stuff, right? All I care about is that he's the victim in this case, right? Juan Martinez. I'm just going to be as objective as possible. I'm not going to take anything away from him, but at the same time, I'm not just going to put him on a pedestal and pretend that he's a saint or that he didn't do anything wrong. Especially when what he did, actually, he gave her the best shot of freedom just by switching to knife first. A lot of that is going to be explained in future videos. Just bear with me, okay? Well, anyway, he was always prepared. He destroyed Arias on the stand. His aggressive style was very good. I enjoyed every second of it, especially with someone like Arias. So yeah, he completely wiped the floor with her, and that was good. However, on the other hand, his strategy wasn't really that good. I'll just give you an example. Imagine having all 5 pieces of Exodia and like a random 6th card in your hand, and you just look at the attack points and you just discard the Exodia pieces because, you know, you think, well, they're weak. This is pretty much what he did. He didn't really rely on the evidence. She's not in jail because of what Juan did. She's there because of what the evidence showed. But had Juan actually followed the evidence and remained objective throughout the trial, she would have been 6 feet deep by now. Juan Martinez is he's like a top tier battle rapper. Like he's more of a battle rapper than he's a prosecutor. You just can't win a verbal exchange. If you get into an argument with Juan, you're just not gonna win. Like he's not gonna lose a verbal exchange no matter what. That's Juan in a nutshell. Now, Jodi Arias. Okay, now where to begin? Obviously, calling her a wolf in sheep's clothing would be an understatement. Like this woman is evil incarnate. I know that people think they know how evil she is, but no, you don't know. Well, if you really want to know how evil she actually is, the first thing you need to do is you need to forget the stupid story that Juan told at trial. I'll just give you an example. Yes, she did have the gun with her. She stole it from her grandparents' house, and and she had it with her when she arrived at Travis's house on June 4th, 2008. No, she did not have the knife with her. However, the gun wasn't even her plan A. She had a third weapon with her. She tried to use that third weapon, didn't work. She used the gun, she shot him, but he survived, and then she improvised and got the knife. I've been working on this case for a long time. I'm still actually working on it right now, and I have a lot to say. If I say everything that I want to say in one video, that video is going to be like 10 days long. One more thing before I conclude. Do you remember when she said this at our sentencing?
I do remember, as I testified to this, I'm sorry, I think I would have testified to this in the 2014 trial. I do remember the moment when the knife went into Travis's throat and he was conscious. He was still trying to attack me. It was I who was trying to get away, not Travis, and I finally did. I never wanted it to be that way, Judge.
People think she said that because she wanted to have one last stab at the Alexanders. Maybe that's partially true, but that's not the main reason. She even said that she was going to testify to this at the second trial, but she didn't really get to finish her testimony. And Wilmot even confirmed that in an interview after the sentencing, and she said that they already knew that she remembered that part. I believe she was going to bring up that part either way because, believe it or not, because this is actually her best shot of freedom, like 10 years from now. And she's still telling half-truths. Because yes, Jodi, he was conscious, but guess what? I have a surprise for you. I know for a fact that you continued stabbing him after you slit his throat, and I can prove it. I know exactly how he was positioned, I know exactly how you were positioned, I know exactly what you were doing with your left hand, and I know exactly what you were doing with your right hand. And guess what? It was what you were doing with your right hand that gave it away. You have no idea how evil this woman is. Just wait until I tell you exactly what her plans were. And if you hate her right now, I promise you, you're gonna hate her like 10 times after you learn what her original plans were. Guess what else, Jodi? I know exactly which knife you used to attack Travis. Actually, I'm gonna show it to you right now. It's this one. And I can prove it without fingerprints, without DNA evidence, without blood evidence, without any of that. Actually, I'm gonna prove it using this knife right here in my hand. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to watch episode 2 of this series, it's available right now on my Buy Me a Coffee page. The link is in the description. A lot of the stuff that you're going to find on my Buy Me a Coffee page, you're not going to find anywhere else on the internet. It's exclusive. We answer questions that the experts couldn't answer, and it is the most accurate analysis that you're going to find on the internet. So if you're interested in this case and you have a lot of questions, which I know you do, if you're interested in this case, there's a lot of unanswered questions. I'm glad to tell you that I have the answers to most of these questions, and a lot of these answers you're not going to find anywhere else on the internet. Also, if you're into deduction, you're going to love this series. So in episode 2 of this series that you can find right now on my Buy Me a Coffee page, I'm going to tell you the exact location of exhibit 163. Yes, it's this photograph. You know, the photograph that you don't really know what you're looking at when you're looking at it? Yeah, that one. I'll tell you the exact location of that photograph. Also, there's this issue regarding the palm print that was left on the wall in the hallway, and her supporters claim that it is literally impossible to prove that this palm print was left there on the wall on June 4th, 2008. One even tried to ask Heather Connor multiple times, and he really tried to pressure her into saying that, yeah, that palm print was left there on June 4th, 2008, but she didn't say what he wanted her to say because she's an honest person, and I have nothing but respect for Heather Connor. However, that doesn't mean that it is impossible to prove that this palm print was left there on June 4th, 2008, which is what I'm gonna do in episode 2 of this series that is available on my Buy Me a Coffee page right now. So subscribe to my Buy Me a Coffee page and you can have access to that episode right now. In this series, I'm not gonna leave Arias and her supporters any loopholes to exploit. We're just gonna seal her fate forever, and we're gonna make sure that she stays where she belongs, even if she gets a new trial. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe, comment, share, like, and support my work on Buy Me a Coffee.